Z Detect in 1v1 by Elo Bandit. So what exactly does Z Detect do? It protects the user for the turn and it boosts evasion by one stage. One stage of evasion boost means any move fired has a 25% chance to miss. So a 100% accurate move would only land 75% of the time. Now, if the Pokemon with Z Detect is also using Substitute, given that they have a 75% chance to be hit each turn, given that they have 5 chances for the opponent to miss them, there's actually a 76.27% chance that at least one move fired against them will miss. So a Pokemon that's using Z Detect and Substitute, that's faster than the opponent, gets a single free turn provided by a reasonably probable mischance to establish a win condition. What Pokemon are actually using Z Detect? We've got fast Pressure Stall Deoxys Speed, fast Sub-Seed Sceptile and others, slow Prankster Dig and Copycat Riolu, Prankster Spite or Toxic Murkrow and Sableye, Snowcloak and Hail Articuno, and Fightinium Z offensive options like Kartana and Conkeldurr. Single-turn win cons are Pokemon that only need one single miss from the opponent in order to win the game. They achieve their win condition 70% of the time or greater, provided that they outspeed in the case of Sceptile or underspeed in the case of Riolu. Sceptile wins after a single miss by setting up a Leech Seed and stalling out with Detect, Substitute, etc. Sceptile also has some offensive options with Focus Blast, which can be turned into All-Out Pummeling, Frenzy Plant, or Leaf Storm, which are both boosted by Overgrow. Riolu, meanwhile, uses his one free turn to set up a Dig. His Dig will land after the opponent hits their move the next turn, meaning Riolu will not be hit by anything. And the following turn, he can simply use Copycat to dig again before the opponent touches him. Essentially, he can dig over and over and over while remaining invulnerable to the opponent's damage. Pressure Stall Deoxys Speed plays with RNG slightly differently than single-turn win cons. Z Detect Deoxys Speed simply relies on the opponent missing 1 out of every 4 moves on average over the course of a battle. Once the opponent runs out of PP for the most threatening move towards Deoxys Speed, the battle is essentially over. Once the opponent runs out of all PP, they struggle to death and Deoxys remains standing as the victor. This strategy is tougher to put an exact win rate on since every matchup is different, but it does work a significant majority of the time. 92 Speed EVs puts you 1 point above +1 base 100s without a boosting nature, such as Adamant Scarf Victini. 212 Speed EVs puts you 1 point above +1 base 100s with a boosting nature, such as Dragon Dance Jolly Charizard X. Up next is our Prankster Stallers. Murkrow and Sableye both get substitutes up with +1 priority, and when an opponent inevitably misses, they either eat a Toxic or lose PP for their chosen offensive move. Investing fully into either defense allows you to almost always survive a hit from that attacking type at 75% health, letting you roost or recover in relative safety. Nightshade is also a decent option to replace Toxic or Spite. Yanmega works almost the exact same way, since Speed Boost sends it rocketing ahead of every other Pokemon in just a turn or two, effectively doing the same thing as Prankster. 1 miss, 1 Toxic, and then simply stall out until the opponent drops dead. I think offensive users are worth talking about because of the dual utility of Fightinium Z. Z Detect and Substitute lets Kartana avoid a hit from a sturdy Pokemon like Magnezone 76.27% of the time, hit it once safely from behind the Substitute, and again with Sacred Sword to finish the job before Magnezone can KO it. Alternatively, drop an all-out pummeling on a Tyranitar and ruin its day immediately. The RNG Roosters, Articuno and Zapdos, use their probable turn behind a Substitute to further increase RNG in their favor. Z Detect Articuno has a 40% chance to dodge any perfectly accurate move thrown at it in Hail, letting it easily maintain a ratio of hits to misses over the course of a battle while Hail whittles down the opponent. Zapdos, meanwhile, looks for paralysis with Discharge, making it even more difficult for opponents to break through its sub and KO it. Pokemon like Raikou would be able to pull off similar strategies if they had reliable recovery, but without it, stalling isn't a viable course of action. Lastly, we have Dragonite, the Multiscale Rooster. This strategy is completely different from all the above mentioned because it does not require substitute. Instead, Dragonite takes advantage of the fact that any move hitting him at full health is reduced by half. By taking a turn to paralyze and slow down the opponent, Dragonite guarantees he will move first. Roosting until you hit full health and your opponent misses means you can set up a damage over time effect like Whirlpool or Wrap at no risk to yourself. Simply continue roosting back to full to proc multiscale and survive virtually any hits over the course of a battle. Without any further ado, let's see some of these strategies in action.
Told myself to push and never stop. I've been stressed out, watching both these hands around the clock. With my eyes wide, trying to get the panorama shot. Whole world getting blurry to me, answers getting lost. So I watch my back and keep it moving to the front. And remember that the world's yours, do it how you want. You've been waiting here for too long, think it's time for you to move on. Realize that there's real lies in these real times to be strong.
I've been waiting all my life, and it was right before my eyes. Watching all this time slip by, now I realize. You know I've been waiting, 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 waiting. But will you wait for me?
Forever grinding, waiting for my time to shine just like a diamond. But life is rough and I ain't with that funny stuff. I use it all as motivation, but it's hard to have the patience. Watching time fly by might be the hardest thing I have to do in life. Frustrated that I ain't where I want to be yet, but I know that I'ma make it if I chase that check. Yes.
Cause I done seen the time go by for too many years now when the stars were aligned. Cause I done seen the time go by. Yeah, I done seen the time go by.
I've been waiting all my life, and it was right before my eyes. Watching all this time slip by, now I realize. I've been waiting all my life, and it was right before my eyes. Watching all this time slip by, now I realize. You know I've been waiting, 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 you know I've been waiting. But will you wait for me?
So who cares and why? On November 24th of 2018, the 1v1 Council announced a quick ban of Detect. The quick ban was met with initial backlash and was rescinded the following day due to a lack of communication between the Council and the community. On December 14th, a suspect test for Z Detect was announced on Smogon. Anyone who achieves Rex will be eligible to vote for or against a ban. The deadline for voting on this suspect test is December 28th. You may be wondering, why not Z Camouflage and Z Magnet Rise? Because there are other Z moves that can increase evasion. Z Crystal Enhanced Camouflage, Magnet Rise, and Lucky Chant all give the same evasion boost as Detect. However, these moves leave the user vulnerable the turn that they're used. They can't utilize the same substitute spam strategies as Z Detect Pokemon, and additionally, banning these moves would harm the viability of Magnezone and Kling Klang, who rely on the combo of Electrium Z and Magnet Rise without evasion for viability. Pro Ban. Points against Z Detect. Detect prevents the user from taking damage the turn that it's used, removing the temporary vulnerability attached to boosting a stat. Increasing evasion means introducing an RNG element into a battle and removing control from the player facing it. Z Detect is dependent on luck and is therefore uncompetitive. Anti-ban. Points for Z Detect. The Pokemon that utilize the evasion boost from Z Detect produce a victory condition with enough reliability that it should not be considered uncompetitive. Strategies revolving around Z Detect and Substitute are comparable to those using Sleep and Substitute, and produce win conditions more reliably than items like Bright Powder or Lax Incense, both of which are currently allowed in 1v1. Z Detect allows the Pokemon who learn it to win matchups that they would otherwise lose a reasonable majority of the time. The point of reasonable majority is slightly subjective, but the line is usually between about 60% win rate and about 80% win rate. Many of these Pokemon rely on Z Detect for viability, such as Sceptile, Riolu, Articuno, Yanmega, etc. None of the Pokemon actually using this strategy are doing so just to add a 25% miss chance to an offensive 1v1 game. Why not? Opportunity cost. For most offensive Pokemon, if you're using a Z Crystal, picking an offensive stab or coverage option will simply yield better results. Looking at possible Z Detect users that don't work and aren't used because they simply aren't effective: Raikou, Weavile, Aerodactyl, Hawlucha, Persian, Skarmory, and Evolutions. These Pokemon are not viable and they have no real strategies associated with Z Detect. Bottom line is everything actually using Z Detect is using it because it wins against the right matchups a reasonable enough percentage of the time that the user becomes comfortable with it. It offers a niche in viability to otherwise completely unused Pokemon, and despite sometimes appearing more luck-based than it is, over the course of a full battle is a fair, reasonable, and competitive strategy. None of these Pokemon are overpowered or significantly underpowered in use, and none of the ones that I covered are absolutely terrible. I'd rank most of them at around C or C- on the viability rankings. Let's briefly talk about Counterplay, because there is a ton of Counterplay for this strategy. It's not like it's impossible to counter or anything like that. You can simply use Substitute, Taunt, Haze, faster Pokemon, speed boosting moves, Rest or other recovery, offensive Z moves that don't deal with accuracy checks, sound-based moves, multi-hit moves, moves with increased accuracy such as Blizzard or Aerial Ace, and we've also got type immunities like Dark, Steel, and Poison, which can't be hurt by Pranksters or Toxics. Undisputed facts! Both sides can agree that every single Pokemon that gets Detect also gets Protect, which has the exact same effect, but with greater PP and normal typing. Therefore, banning the move Detect would not damage the viability of any Pokemon not using it specifically with the Fightinium Z Evasion combo. Fightinium Z and Detect does not fall under Evasion Clause, which specifically targets the moves Double Team and Minimize. These moves are stackable, they can go past one stage of evasion, and they don't require an item slot. That is the important distinction. And finally, a note about precedent. This ruling is likely to set a precedent about how the 1v1 Council and community handles evasion, RNG, and hacks-based strategies. If this ban goes through, I expect to see following suspects on 0.9 evasion items, Serene Grace flinch, and potentially even sleep strategies. If this ban fails, I expect to see harder lines being drawn about what exactly makes a Pokemon uncompetitive. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Jirachi unban if the 1v1 community wants to remain consistent in its rulings regarding RNG-based strategies. This topic brings to light the relationship between the Council and the community, the communication between the two, and the way bans will be handled moving forward in the metagame. If you would like to participate in this suspect test and cast your own vote, the link is in the description below. Suspect test ends December 28th. Thank you all so much for watching, and I truly hope that you've learned something.